Thank you, Dr. Summer Casmel. I love listening to her. Just inspiring. I love her so much. All right, so we get to do something super fun up next. In 2019, we started the Golden Rhino Award. And if you're a newbie, you're like, what the heck is a Golden Rhino Award? Well, luckily, our host is coming back out here to tell us. Let's bring back Dr. Mark Costes.
Hey guys, stand up, please. All right, I understand. I try to limit the amount of carbs that we put out, but they put big old hunks of bread out there. How many had a hunk of bread? How many people are feeling it right now? I know how it is. All right, so we're gonna do a little special operations trick, and it's called box breathing. How many people do cold plunge or super hot sauna? Anyone? How many people use box breathing and get through that shit? All right, I'm gonna show you guys exactly what to do. If you're feeling yourself in a super stressful or high panic situation, a lot of anxiety, this works really well. If you're in a very physically demanding or something that is taking a lot of willpower to stick through, like a cold plunge, when you're trying to get through your two minutes and 15 seconds, and you're trying to get that extra 45 seconds in the cold plunge, this works really well. If you're in a 190-degree sauna and you are 26 minutes into a 30-minute session, this works really well, okay? Box breathing is very, very simple. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, inhale, hold 2, 3, 4, exhale 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. And we'll do 2 of those together, okay? You guys good? All right, shake it out, here we go. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, and inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3. Hold. 2, 3. That's 1. And inhale, big one. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And hold. 2, 3, 4. All right, shake it out. Have a seat. Okay, thank you guys. All right, we are back. And Ashley alluded to this Golden Rhino Award. We're going to get to the case study of one of our most successful year-over-year members. His name is Dr. R. We're going to do the case study of Dr. R. But first, we're going to finish up a couple topics that I left before Jocko came up on stage. How about that Jocko Willink, huh? Pretty amazing guy. You'll never meet a nicer, more humble person. He lives exactly what he preaches on his podcast, etc. And the level of badassery, you guys, it's legit. It's legit. Like in the MMA and jiu-jitsu world, he's a legend. He's extremely, extremely competitive. He is beat and hangs with some of the best in the world at what he does. He's cornered for world champions in the octagon. He's a legitimate force to be reckoned with physically, and a very nice guy to boot. So we talked about our average mastermind stats already. Okay, so there's good news and bad news about dentistry, right? We make $244,000 per year on average, which is, 3.5 times the average wage of the average American worker. Congratulations, that's good, but it does not come without its price. There is a price to pay for a very high stress environment, an environment where you are the leader of small, mid-sized, sometimes large teams. There's a lot of risk involved with what we do as far as financial risk. And there's a lot of liability in what we do as far as patient care, taking the lives of people, taking the health and welfare and lives, sometimes if we're doing IV sedation and larger surgical procedures, of patients in our own hands. All the while having to manage human resources and marketing and operations. It is an extremely, extremely difficult position to be in many times. And remember, of the 202,000 dentists that are practicing right now, both specialists and general dentists, 73% own their dental practices. That's a large number of people that are doing this plate spinning and juggling on the daily. Okay, so it's important for you guys to understand that the people that are in this room, I'm preaching to the choir, right? You guys already know that things come with their stressors. You guys already know that advanced education in clinical as well as practice management and leadership and business is very, very important. But remember, the vast majority of dentists do not experience what you guys are experiencing and do not have the mindset that you guys have. So there is a lot of stress out there associated with our profession. And there is no coping mechanism because people silo themselves almost immediately after dental school. I see it over and over and over again when, a 60 to 75-year-old dentist will call me and say, hey, Mark, I don't know how to read a P&L and I've owned my dental practice for 35 years. I have no idea my financial condition. I don't know what my profitability is because I just kind of gauge the health of my business based on how much money is in the bank account at the end of the month. I've done a decent job saving for retirement, but if I don't sell my practice at a really good multiple, I'm kind of screwed. So I think I'm going to continue to work into my mid-70s, which is the only chance that I really have to have a decent retirement. I encounter that discussion several times a week, many, many times a year, unfortunately. So here's the true kind of cost of siloing yourselves and not being able to cope with the stresses that come along naturally with dentistry. Drug and alcohol abuse is very prevalent within our profession. Anxiety and depression, 2 times more likely than the general public, are dental practice owners and dental clinicians in general. One of the reasons why we offer therapy and psychiatric care for free inside DSN. It's part of your membership. Sadly enough, even though the prevalence is really high of anxiety and depression in our profession, of the 1,500 people that are members of DSN, even though psychiatric care and therapy is included, we have about a 25% take rate, unfortunately. Divorce is higher than the average American inside our profession, as is suicide. The urban legend about suicide is not true. We are not the highest profession for suicide. Right now, currently, it's veterinarians is number 1, family physicians is number 2, and dentistry is number 3 as far as suicide for white-collar professions. You are 2 times more likely to commit suicide than the general public if you are a dentist. Additionally, fewer than 10% of dentists feel like they have been adequately prepared for practice ownership after graduation from dental school. That shouldn't shock anybody. We've all been through dental school, except for the remaining D3s and D4s in the house here. And I think that if you talk to each and every one of them, they do not feel adequately prepared for practice ownership currently, and chances are they won't after graduation. 83% of dentists reported consistently experiencing moderate to severe stress. That's a big shocker. 34% of dentists reported to being frequently or always physically or emotionally exhausted. It's true story. 90% of dentists reported to be experiencing some level of acute or chronic musculoskeletal pain. I don't think that anybody can say that they haven't done class 2s for the last 4 hours of a day and not stood up with a sore lower back. Greater than 50% of dentists surveyed wish that they would have selected a different career. This is the one I always kind of settle on and quote more often than anything else. 50% of your colleagues, even though our earning potential is what it is, wish that they would have picked something else. I have a very unique perspective because I was able to do things, not by choice, to make a living prior to dental school, 3.5 years of kind of trying to get into dental school, getting my MBA at the same time, but also trying to make a living in a profession outside of dentistry. It's one of the reasons that I think that I have a unique perspective on our profession. I've never taken my degree for granted, and I've never, ever selected or wished that I would have selected a different career. Never. Because I had the opportunity to see what it takes to make sub $75,000, sub $60,000, the amount of work that it took, and the reality of a future without the safety net of a clinical skill set that you guys all have. I mean, just think about this. If it all went to heck and you had to file for bankruptcy because something horrible happened with your dental practice, or you mismanaged money horribly, a really, really, really bad case scenario is that you could go associate for $175,000, $200,000, which is still 2.5 times the salary of the average American. Our default safety net is better than most people could possibly ever dream of. Yet, things are so bad within our profession that half of us wish that we would have done anything else. Very, very sad. I think that the reasons behind that are the lack of education, lack of understanding on how to actually pull the levers and push the buttons in order to create a very, very successful dental practice, to be profitable, to have good work-life balance, unaware at all of what to do, and we're doing it alone. We're doing it alone. I would say less than 0% of the people that join the Dental Success Institute or our Elite Practice Mastermind group and have been in for greater than 12 months wish that they would have selected a different career, because they're able to commiserate and collaborate. When things suck, they have 200 other people to share the suckage with. And when people are great, when things are great, you have people that you can collaborate and celebrate with. That makes a huge, huge difference. And finally, 73% of the 202,000 practicing dentists own their own dental practices, which is down from 85% in 2005. All right. The parable of the fisherman. If you guys are at all into personal development, you guys have probably heard some version of the parable of the fisherman. How many people have heard some version of the parable of the fisherman? How many people have heard this song called The Life by Kenny Chesney? He's singing about the parable of the fisherman. Can we take that down just a little bit? Perfect. Okay. I love me some Kenny. I love me some Kenny. All right. So the parable of the fisherman. I have a slightly different take on the parable of the fisherman. So I'm just going to talk you through it. It takes about 90 seconds. I'll tell you the story, the folklore, the urban legend of this fisherman here in a small fishing village in Mexico. So, Wall Street investment banker is experiencing a long-awaited and much-needed vacation from the stresses of Wall Street money management. He decides to go to a small fishing village in Mexico and is standing on the pier of this small fishing village the first morning of his vacation. He sees a single fisherman rowing in a tiny, small boat, and looks into his boat and sees that he has several beautiful yellowfin tuna and red snapper that he has caught. And he comments to the fisherman and compliments him on his catch and asks him simply, "Hey, how long did it take you to catch all those beautiful fish?" And the fisherman replied, "Only a very little while." And the investment banker said, "Well, why didn't you stay out there longer and catch more fish?" And the fisherman said, "Well, I have everything I need for my family right here." And with a puzzled look, the banker says, "Well, what do you do with the rest of your days?" And the fisherman said, "Well, I sleep in every day. I fish a little. I take long walks on the beach with my wife. I take long siestas, and every night I stroll into town with my guitar, sip wine, and play guitar with my amigos. I have a busy and fulfilling life." And the banker scoffed and said, I have a Harvard MBA and I can help you. And he says, if you spend more time fishing, you could double your intake and you'll be able to sell those fish and upgrade the size of your boat. Eventually, you'll have a fleet of small boats, which you could trade in for a single large commercial vessel. And if you stay at it and work really hard, you'll be able to build a fleet of commercial vessels. Eventually, of course, you'll have to move to Mexico City and then Los Angeles and then New York City to manage your growing enterprise. And the fisherman said, and then what, senor? How long will this take? He said, well, this will probably take 10 to 15 years. And the fisherman said, well, then what? And the banker said, well, that's the best part. Then you have a big enough enterprise that you will attract private equity. And they'll pay a handsome sum for your business. And then you can sell it, and then you can make millions. Millions, senor? He said, yes, millions. And the fisherman says, and then what? And the banker says, that's the best part. Then you can move to a small fishing village, sleep in, take long walks on the beach, have siestas, stroll into town every night with your guitar, play your guitar with your friends while you drink wine. Okay, so who has it right? Who's got it right? The fisherman or the banker? Well, the slant is, in the personal development world, they're wagging their finger at the investment banker, of course. Because why do all of this and come to a full circle moment when you realize, why the heck did I do this in the first place? But I'm going to play devil's advocate. Okay? I'm no commercial banker. And I think the truth resides somewhere between Jose and the Wall Street banker. Because I want you to think about this. What happens if Jose breaks his arm? What happens if Jose's rowboat springs a leak? What happens if there is a huge storm that changes the pattern of the currents, driving all the fish out into the sea and away from this tiny little fishing village, leaving Jose with no fish to provide for his family? What happens if Jose's wife comes down with a terminal disease or one of his children? What happens when Jose is too old to pull in fish anymore? What happens if one of Jose's relatives in a not so far city comes down with a terminal illness and he can't afford to get there because of his current lifestyle? We hear a lot about this notion of a lifestyle business, and a lot of people even talk about this lifestyle practice. And I have to be honest that my view on the quote unquote lifestyle practice has changed quite a bit since I started coaching and consulting. In the beginning, I used to think that it sounded really, really attractive to have a 2, maybe 3 operatory practice with a single provider, part-time hygienist, single person up front answering the telephones, and maybe a full-time dental assistant. Can you imagine how low the overhead could be considering the output of this single provider? That right there, my friends, could be sold as the dream to many people that are D3s, D4s, or even somebody that's worked corporate for a long period of time. Can you imagine doctors only having to manage 2.5 people and only having to worry about maintenance for 2 or 3 operatories, and how cheap your rent would be? I mean, you could run a 31, 32% overhead operation, keep 70% of all of your production. That sounds glorious, doesn't it? And considering how much stress comes with humans and overhead and maintenance and fixed costs and all of those things, it wouldn't be that hard to talk a lot of people into the lifestyle practice. But I want you to think about what that actually means. We talked about what Jose's vulnerabilities are. What are your vulnerabilities if you're a single doc practice? What are your vulnerabilities if you don't have any redundancies in any of the roles in your dental practice? I've personally owned 3 operatory practices, 4 operatory practices. I've had multiple practices at a time. When I had 10 dental offices, I had 3 of them that was a single provider, associate-run dental practice. Can you think of a more vulnerable position to be when you have a 4-operatory rural practice with a single provider, dental provider that doesn't own the dental practice, and you're building an operation around that person? What type of vulnerability is that? That's not the kind of lifestyle practice that I'm talking about. The bottom line is that Jose has a lot of vulnerabilities. His lifestyle sounds extremely attractive, but there's a different way to create a lifestyle practice. And I think it's counter to the original idea of what a lifestyle practice should look like. I actually contend that you have to get bigger in order to create freedom, not stay small in order to create freedom. Now let's think about that for a second. If I, on the other hand, in the rural practices that I owned that had 3 and 4 operatories that were extremely profitable, but very, very vulnerable to provider risk. If I, on the other hand, had a practice that had a minimum of 6 operatories in an area that was less than 45 minutes from a major metropolitan area and had a lead front office and an office manager, a minimum of 2 dental assistants, 1.5 per doctor per operatory, a couple of hygienists, and maybe an off-site billing department, maybe outsourced billing department, outsourced insurance verification. That sounds like a lot of moving parts, which sounds like golden handcuffs, but what it actually is freedom. Because if you can create a real business that is not dependent on your 2 hands, not dependent on you pushing on the rheostat and holding that high speed, that is real freedom. Up until 6 months before I retired, I was getting called in on the regular for those same 4 and 5 operatory practices because they were run by single providers. That is a level of vulnerability that I would not recommend for anybody in this room. So I see it all the time. People have either gotten into this dental practice ownership journey with a 1,200 square foot space, barely enough room for 4 operatories, definitely not enough room for expansion, definitely not enough room to put another provider in there next to the owner doctor. And they sign a 10-year ironclad lease and they're stuck. They're stuck for 10 years in this model that sounded like freedom, but actually you've just built yourself a prison and bought yourself a job. So I want you guys to think about things a little bit differently when it comes to freedom and expansion versus staying small. So the lifestyle business defined. These types of businesses prioritize personal freedom, flexibility, and work-life balance over growth and metrics. They're typically built around the passion, skills, and interests of the owner, allowing them to create a business that aligns with their own unique lifestyle. Lifestyle businesses typically have limited scalability and potential for growth because the owner believes that such growth would destroy the lifestyle for which the business was created in the first place. I get it, man. And you're going to hear a lot of the talking heads online influencers talking about solopreneurship, outsourcing everything overseas. I'm all about outsourcing. I'm all about delegating. I'm all about eliminating. But you have to make sure that you have redundancies within your operation and work the profit and the expenses into that, or else you'll never truly be free. So the paradox of the lifestyle business: have you created yourself a job or a business? What are the vulnerabilities of a lifestyle business? We just talked about that. And how can you protect yourself from those vulnerabilities? Something to think about. Students in the back, think about that when you're selecting your new practice or your new location for your de novo startup. And if you have found yourself 2 years into a 10-year lease for a 3 or 4 operatory practice with no room for expansion, come talk to us. We have some strategies that we could potentially work through with you. But it's not going to be easy because the model was flawed from the beginning. So creating a real lifestyle business, you need sufficient physical capacity. All right, so, hey, listen, the consolidation wave is coming. Some people say that we're going to be 70% consolidated in the next 7 to 10 years. I think that's a little aggressive. I think we might be 50% consolidated in the next 7 to 10 years. But right now, we're just below 30% consolidated. So that means that we're going to experience somewhere between 20 and 40% consolidation in the next 7 to 10 years. That means that if you don't have a practice that's attractive to a DSO, you're going to significantly limit your buying pool to other doctors who are going to pay a significantly less valuation than a DSO would for an attractive DSO practice. Now, you can dig your heels in and say, hell no, I'm never going to sell to a DSO, those greedy bastards. Or you can say, the writing is on the wall. I can select the right DSO someday, but I'm going to have to continue to grow and create a model that is attractive to, say, 70% of the marketplace instead of the small sliver of a marketplace that is diminishing every single day. That's the way you have to look at this. So if you have a practice within 45 minutes of a major metropolitan area in an area that's growing, not declining, that is not dependent on a single industry, you have a minimum of 6 operatories, preferably 7. You have multiple providers. You have redundancies in the roles within those providers. If you have negotiated your fees with third-party payors or dental insurance, if you don't have a significant aging issue and your production to collection ratio is relatively tight, if your EBITDA is 20% or greater, which means your overhead minus provider compensation is 50% or less, you have become an attractive target for a DSO, and you'll get a decent valuation. All right? But that's what we're looking at. These are the sorts of things that you have to think about when you're purchasing your first dental practice. What do you do if you bought a 3 or 4 or 5 operatory practice with no room for expansion and a really, really restrictive lease? You're kind of screwed. And if that's anybody in this room, that's okay. We could figure it out. But if you haven't made that mistake yet in the model and haven't made these types of commitments yet, make sure you think twice and come up with a good plan. Okay, number 2, provider redundancy, positional redundancy, streamlined systemization, clinical calibration, recruiting, training, and onboarding, real-time KPI tracking, and up-to-date financial reporting. These are the things that they're looking for from a corporate perspective if you're going to be an attractive target at some point in your career. It could be 10 years, 12 years, 15 years from now. But it's best to start thinking about it now. The law of entropy. So entropy, the definition is that every system will trend towards a process of degradation, disorder, and chaos, and disorganization. So you're going to go from an area of low entropy, where things are nice and tight, to high entropy. So imagine when you buy a brand new dental practice. You're going to go from high entropy, things are all over the place, chaotic. You're going to tighten things down, super systemized, really, really tight systems. You have policies in place, tight systems. You take your eye off the ball for a minute. You put a new office manager in place. You go on a 1-month vacation and you come back. Entropy took over. Things are all over the place again. And it could be a matter of days. So you're looking at low entropy, high entropy, low entropy, high entropy, just like a sine wave. High, low, high, low, high, low. You have to be aware of this pattern. It's bound to happen, which means we can't rest on our laurels because I just put my operations manual together. It's 12 chapters. I'm very proud of myself. I'm going to have a big launch meeting. We are going to instill this and regular weekly growth meetings and morning huddles. I'm super stoked. You take your eye off the ball. You stop having your monthly performance reviews. Next thing you know, 90 days, entropy has taken over again, because the tendency will always lead towards disarray and disorganization. You have to keep your finger on that at all times. You can't let up ever. It's a natural law of the universe. You're always going to go from low entropy to high entropy. Keep that in mind. So how do you avoid that? And what fail-safes can you put in place? Here are the frameworks that we utilize, and these we created a decade ago. I have the good fortune and privilege to be able to speak to hundreds of dentists every month, thousands every year. And even though we feel as though our problems are unique to our dental practice, let me tell you this. 95% of all problems that you're going to see in dental practice ownership are going to fall under one of these 6 main pillars. I'm telling you. I've been doing this a long time. Been talking to a lot of people. Hey, doc, I got a crazy one for you. I bet you've never heard this. I bet I have. Some version of it. So foundational principles, mission, vision, core values, operational systemization. Do you have a process for everything that happens in your practice, both administrative and clinical? Lifetime patient experience. Is that scripted and practiced on the regular? New patient acquisition. How are we getting new patients to flow through the dental practice? If you're getting 50 new patients per year, where are they coming from? Is it from external marketing? Is it from word of mouth? Do you know? Human resources, overhead, and cash flow control. Those are the 6 main pillars. Your main concerns in business most likely fall under one of those 6 main pillars. The 4 futures, we talked about this earlier this morning. Mind, meaning muscle, and money. Mind, meaning muscle, and money. We're talking about the composite human being. The person that you are, not just financially, but from a headspace perspective, from a personal relationships perspective, from a physical well-being perspective, physical health perspective. Where are you? Do you have a way of tracking it? Are you constantly tracking your progress? Have you even baselined where you are right now so that you can measure in comparison as you start an initiative to improve any area of your life? Here's our ethos: personal integrity, self-awareness, discipline, grit, passion, and empathy. These are strikingly similar to my own personal core values. Do you have a personal set of core values for yourself? If you don't, it's the number one and most important place to start. Foundational principles are very, very important. You cannot build a skyscraper on a shaky foundation. Here are our incredible black belt coaches. There's 18 of them here. All of these people have gone through the mastermind group. They've come out on the other side of this as extremely sophisticated operators. Every single one of them has a minimum of 20% EBITDA, 50% overhead, which means their expenses are in check and they're running a super tight, efficient ship. They all have a systemization score over 80%. They have a leadership score of over 80% and a cultural assessment score of over 80%. So not only are they systemized, but they have a strong culture and they have developed themselves in a leadership capacity to run this thing day in and day out. Very, very profitable. Every single one of those people is a net worth and net income millionaire. That's not one of the parameters for becoming one, but when you do things right, that happens pretty easily. So the characteristics of a black belt: mindset, the 1 nugget rule, we talked about that. I gave you 6. Multidimensional success, the success tax, and the DSI ethos. The success tax is something we talk about often. As you progress, get more sophisticated, and build a larger organization, your problems will not get smaller. If you're hoping, if you work really hard on the other side of this, when you actually reach your goal that you set arbitrarily, say 3 years ago, that all is going to be good and your problems are going to go away? No, your problems are going to get bigger. And we always high five when we have something that's a stumper, and the type of question that gets circulated in the black belt coaches thread, and we're like, we got a doozy for you. Here's a biggie. Typically, we're like, man, high five. That is a great one. I've never actually worked myself through this type of problem before, but knuckles, man. You earn this. You earn this problem. That's the success tax, because you don't get problems this sophisticated unless you're getting more successful. Things get more complex exponentially as you start making more money, as you bring on more humans into your operation, as you scale. Just expect it. The DSI belt classification, so white belt systemization score is less than 40%. Overhead is greater than 60%. Blue belt, 40 to 60, about 60% overhead. Systemization, leadership, and culture, 61 to 79 for brown belt, starting to look really good here. 55% overhead. And black belt, 80 to 100% systemization, leadership, and culture. And 50% overhead, 20% EBITDA. Okay? That means that at minimum, including doctor compensation, if you have $1 million practice, you have $200,000 of profit. That's whether or not you are doing any of the dentistry. If you're doing the dentistry, multiply whatever total production that you are doing times 30%. You get that as take home, then you get profitability as take home as well. All right. I'm just going to burn through these really quick. I just want to show you guys that there is some sort of a home run document. I think it's in large enough font that you guys can actually read it in your packets. So take this home and take these quizzes. It'll take you some time to work through it, but it'll give you a baseline of where you are as far as our systemization standards. So you'll be able to take this and say, hey, I mean, there's some stuff on here that I know we can fix in 3 days, but I'm going to be true to this actual exercise and give myself a real score. So you might walk out of this and have 15, 20% systemization score. That's cool, man. At least you know where you're at. You're going to have some idea of what needs prioritized focus. Remember that from earlier this morning? Okay, so pillar number 1 is foundation. Pillar number 2 is systemization. Pillar number 3 is lifetime patient experience. Number 4 is marketing and new patient acquisition. 5 is cash flow. And then 6 is HR, hiring, firing, and onboarding. What systems do you guys have in place for those particular things? Okay. Again, expense ratios, 60, greater than 60, 60, 55, 50, and less than 50 for phase 4. Okay? And here are the things that we work on in each of the phases. The foundational phase, phase 1, which is the reason why this morning when I was showing you guys the actual results for 0 to 12 months within the mastermind, we had 11% top line growth and 4% decrease in overhead, a total of 15% increased profitability for 0 to 12 months. That's because we're focusing mostly on phase 1. We're focusing on business awareness, foundational principles, team culture, and systemization. Not even thinking for a second about new patient acquisition or increased clinical skill set or anything like that. We're talking about foundational infrastructure. Plug all the holes. Get the machine ready for massive amounts of intake. I never understood consulting companies that look at somebody's P&L, or actually most times they don't even look at a P&L, and they're like, okay, you want to increase your income? You need to spend $25,000 on this marketing campaign, or you need to take this $35,000 IV sedation / all-on-6 course. It's like, dude, you have no idea what you're pouring all this extra income into. How can you ever tell somebody to increase revenue before they even look at the infrastructure of a business? It makes no sense to me. 99% of consulting companies are focused on new patients and increasing revenue. Why that first? It makes no sense to me. Makes no sense at all. Phase 2 is growth. Now, we fixed the infrastructure. We're going to focus on growth now. Increased revenue now. Okay? Emphasis on increased hygiene production, team incentives, potentially, not crazy about them. Increased data analysis, cost per procedure, internal and external marketing. And then finally, phase 3 is scale. We figured the levers that we need to push and pull in order to increase revenue now. We have a solid infrastructure. Now we're going to scale this thing. That means potentially adding capacity to our existing facility. That means potentially now at this point, we're thinking about shopping for second, third, and fourth practices. Not before, but after you're at black belt level and you now have something, a replicable model that can move on to the next thing. I made that mistake. Why have a blue belt practice when I can have 3 white belt practices? That was my model. Makes perfect sense, right? Have 3 shitty practices instead of 1 decent one. Not a lot of wisdom in that. Okay. So here are our past Golden Rhino recipients. Beautiful set of people. Dr. X, Ben Kakis, you're going to hear from him tomorrow. Incredible speaker. He is our poster child, man. He was our first ever Golden Rhino recipient. Look at this dude. 536% growth since year 1 when he joined us. Incredible, incredible example of implementation. When he started with us, he was doing $597,000. In 2023, he ended up at $3.8 million with a 46% overhead. You just heard from Summer Casmel. She's sweet, but she's a killer, man. Don't take her soft-spoken, gentle approach, and don't let that fool you because she's a killer in business. She's experienced 262% growth. She started with us at $1.4 million. Last year, she closed out at $4.5 million with 45% overhead. Matt Slivka, 146% growth. You'll see that these aren't all the biggest practices. These are just extremely efficient practices, well-run practices. Year 1, he was with us, 1.2. The end of last year, he was at $3.1 million, 46% overhead. And then Dr. Patel, Dr. P, he had 85% growth with us. Year 1, he was at 1.027 million. And then he almost doubled it by the second year, which was $1.9 million. Here's the kicker though, 37% overhead. That may or may not impress you, but that's crazy. That's crazy. That means that he is nearly 30% profitable, which is extremely, extremely impressive. So today we're going to highlight in the last 19 minutes that we have together in this session, Dr. R. Dr. R has a very special story, and we always start with the Big 3 questionnaire. Here's a little something about Dr. R. Hi, Mark. Happy New Year. The year was 2019. I hope all is well. Thank you for all the free information that you give so generously to our profession. I need your help. Let me give you some background. I'm a struggling new owner of a 3-operatory general dental practice, although I'm a periodontist. I know this probably doesn't make much sense, but allow me to share my backstory. I was a traveling periodontist at this practice for a few years. I came in 2 days a month to place implants and do other perio-related work. The previous owner did mostly bread and butter dentistry, plus some sleep apnea and Botox. He referred out all other specialty work, endo, ortho, etc. Unfortunately, the owner started having health issues on and off through 2017 that got progressively worse beginning in 2018. As a result, the practice started declining rapidly. I tried to help by filling voids, adding more days, and taking over some of his restorative work, but it wasn't enough to keep the practice from losing more and more patients. At the same time, and unbeknownst to me, he was also attempting to sell the practice, but no one was interested due to its rapid decline and negative cash flow. In desperation, in late summer of 2018, he approached me and said, I know this doesn't make any sense, but would you be interested in taking over my practice? I can't continue working under these circumstances and have no prospective buyers. The practice wasn't at all what I envisioned for a practice I wanted to own. The infrastructure was 20 years old, at least one, with one front desk, one hygienist, and one dental assistant. It was about 50 minutes from my house as well. However, since I knew some of the existing patients, the staff really encouraged me to buy it, and the owner reduced his asking price. So I took the practice over in 2018 against the advice of several of my advisors at the time. From a numbers perspective, the practice was a 3-op practice, old equipment that hadn't been maintained, on track to do $550,000 in 2018. The owner had lost an accumulated total of $83,000 from January to September. So basically, he had 120% overhead by the time he had taken over, or by the time I took over. I'll send you the P&Ls. I also bought I bought the practice for $225,000, a $50,000 working capital loan, and bought an $80,000 CBCT. Mark, my problem is that I've never owned a dental practice or a business, and I know very little, if any, about the business of dentistry. I spent the vast majority of my time after graduation improving my clinical skills. I've tried listening to your podcast and other business-related podcasts, which has helped me a little, but I need more help. I'm sure by now you can see how difficult the past few months has been for me. My bank account is draining so fast, and I will be running out of cash very soon the way things are going. I feel like this whole thing was a huge mistake. I thought I could rescue a failing practice, but don't think I will have enough time before I run out of money. I really feel bad about this situation. I feel like I risked the future of my wife, my 3-year-old, and 4-month-old sons. Can you help me? Obviously, I want to make sure that my family and I don't go bankrupt. This is his second question. Where are you going? My vision is to take over this practice and put in efficient systems and technology to make it run like a well-oiled machine, maximize my personal take-home income, and pay back my loans. I want to do high-quality dentistry using the latest technology. I want to continue to be at the cutting edge of continuing education courses and lecture at the local study clubs. I want to invest and have passive income. I want to retire by the age of 55, and I'm 39 now. I want to get healthier and start going back to the gym. I want to spend more time with my wife and children, and I want to go on more vacations and travel more, at least 4 to 6 weeks per year. How am I going to get there? How am I planning to reach these ambitious goals? I don't exactly know. But I do know that it is possible to have it both ways. A healthy lifestyle, a profitable professional life, and fulfillment. I'm sure with your help, we can figure out how to get there. Please let me know if I'm a good candidate for your group and if you can help me with my situation. Thank you, Dr. R. Here is his scorecard. You can see clearly that his net production, the first year that he took over the practice, remember, he was doing about $550,000 the year that he took it over. After a full year of owning the dental practice, he's done pretty good. He's now up to $1.25 million, 91% production collection ratio. That's something that we had to work on, which was his production to collection ratio. His overhead at the time was 65%. If you look at the right variance column, second one from the right, you'll see some red numbers. Those are the areas where he is overspending and a little bit outside of the industry norms. Okay, so he has a few things like hygiene salaries slightly elevated, insurance slightly elevated, facility and equipment slightly elevated. His dental supplies really, really high at 8% over, something that we could fix in 30 days. No issue. And then other expenses, 4.21. That's usually the uncategorized expenses, sometimes one-off expenses, sometimes things like handpieces and one-off like stocking up on bone or implants or something would go in the other expense category. Okay. So here's what he's looking at from a ratio perspective. 22.5%, 22.25% for payroll, which is good. 42.5% for fixed and variable expense. We want to see that significantly lower. So that needs to be closer to 30%. His doctor compensation, 15.44%, low. And it says that his profitability is 19.81%. You can see here that if your doctor compensation is very low and your profitability is higher than you think it should be, then he is rolling over some of the doctor compensation into the profitability column. That's okay. That's a tax strategy. That's fine, but that's what's happening there. He really shouldn't have 20% profitability with these numbers because he's underpaying himself as a provider. Does that make sense? So instead of the 25 to 30% that he would get paid as a provider, instead he's getting paid 15% and he's rolling over that extra 10% into profitability. His total overhead is 64.75, practice revenue 1.1, debt service 47,000. So his income at the time in 2019 was 31,000. Remember, he's underpaying himself as a provider. So 31,000 for his owner income plus $340,000 in profit. So he's making $371,000 after 1 year of buying a distressed practice. Good job, buddy. Really, really well done. This is after a year with us, after struggling for the first 3 months of 2018. He bought it in the tail end of 2018. He went from $550,000 that year to 1.1. Bravo. Really nice work. We focused on the foundational principles, operational systemization, all 6 of the pillars in phase 1, foundational phase. We utilize the APE framework, analyze, identify, prioritize, plan, and execute. Basically, in a nutshell, that just means that he took all of the assessments, systemization assessment, leadership assessment, cultural assessment, and we decided which priorities we were going to focus on. Remember I said earlier, you can't focus on 25 priorities. If you have 25 priorities, they're not priorities, they're everything. You have to pick 1, 2, or 3, make the hard decision of what you're going to focus on like a laser, put into that Asana pyramid of clarity and go after it. The plan. Implement a leadership development plan. Master all aspects of the patient experience. Develop metrics, accountabilities, advanced training for the hygiene department. Improve the 4 future scores in all quadrants. Get to black belt level in all systems, leadership and culture. Significantly improve clinical efficiency and block scheduling. This was our plan. We worked on his leadership a lot. This is an area that he claimed from the very beginning that he struggled with. He struggled with imposter syndrome. He struggled with people not respecting his authority. He struggled, frankly, with leading people because he didn't want to be seen as a jerk. So he took this leadership assessment and we determined which areas we wanted him to focus on. The leadership assessment was low, but he focused. He's an implementer. He focused very, very hard on his leadership acumen. And this is one of the main things that really led to his meteoric growth over the next 2 years. So with that leadership, one of the big levers to push and pull is the ability to flex that leadership muscle in regularly run meetings that go by the framework of PITA. Remember, presence, intention, time, and agenda. If you can run good meetings, even if you stumble in the beginning, even if you're not super articulate in the beginning, even if you're super nervous speaking in front of 4 or 6 people that are the people on your team, eventually you're going to catch your stride and eventually you're going to become an effective leader. Remember, it's very, very simple. Be crystal clear about what success looks like for the roles, for every single one of the roles in your position. Be very clear in your practice. Be very clear about what your expectations are. Communicate those expectations. Hold people accountable. Check in regularly. Give them all the resources necessary to be successful. That's all it takes to be an effective leader. Show compassion and empathy. Learn how to communicate. Okay. Weekly growth meetings, we've talked about this. Quarterly calibration meetings, all need to follow the PITA principle. Departmental assessment. I recommend monthly performance reviews. I know that some of you guys that have 20 to 30 employees are like, there's no frickin' way I'm going to be able to sit down and do a performance review with each and every one of my 20 or 30 people every single month. I get that. That makes sense. You're not doing them. You're going to do maybe the first few, and you're going to show the leads for that particular department how to do them, or the office manager how to do them. You're going to divide and conquer, and you're going to check in. The way that we do performance reviews is we have number 1 through 17. These questions could be anything. Whatever is important to you for that particular position, you're going to want to list that as a sentence, and you're going to have them rate themselves on a score of 1 to 5 for each of those important things in that particular position. They're going to get a score based on their own personal self-assessment. You're going to take the same assessment, or their leader, their direct supervisor is going to take the same assessment. They're going to compare notes. I gave myself a 1. You gave me a 3. Let's discuss. Just should take 15, 20 minutes tops for each of these assessments. You slowly start honing in on what your expectations are for that position and what success looks like for that particular position. Operations manual. If you guys don't have it, we have a digital and physical version of the book that Dr. Addison Killeen and I wrote together, the Dental Operations Manual. If you don't have it and you don't have an operations manual, that's a great place to start. Just get that and copy it verbatim. If you're a member of DSN, you get a digital version, and you can literally just change it digitally or not. I suggest you get some authorship, like Jocko said, from your team members in order to create that operations manual, but it's a great place to start. Okay. Business awareness and acumen. Here's some of the things that we were working on with him as far as business awareness. Calibration with the bookkeeper and the CPA, making sure that all the categorizations were accurate. You'd be surprised how many times people put things like dental chairs or Cavitrons under dental supplies. And that, that Glidewell lab bill of $9,000 ends up in dental supplies instead of lab. Make sure you're calibrating with your CPA, particularly happens with non-dental CPAs, on the correct way to categorize your expenses within the dental practice. This should be something that you should do every single month as a quick check. And you're going to get to a point where the P&Ls are going to start to look really odd if something was categorized incorrectly, but you have to have your finger on the pulse of where these expenses are getting categorized. Cash flow and overhead awareness. We talk about that a lot. Monthly break-even point. What's your bare ass minimum for your practice? That's all associate pay. That is all debt service and all fixed and variable expense. So you're going to break even, excluding your own pay. You can add your pay into it if you like, and you're going to get a break-even point. You make your first dollar after you collect $1 above that break-even point. And you make no money if you don't hit the break-even point that month. That's where that ratio of overhead percentage comes into play. Team cultural assessment, very, very simple to take something subjective like culture, we talked about this earlier, and turn it into something objective, like a baseline score and something that you can track for improvement. Take your core values that hopefully you're getting help and authorship with your team, 6 to 7 of those, write them on this team cultural assessment, and take a nice objective look at each of your core values and how much the team member in front of you embodies each of those core values. Open and honest communication. She gossips every day. 0. Committed to outstanding customer service. She's kind of a bitch on the phone. 2. All right, that's what that looks like. Or she's extremely awesome on the phone. Very, very easy to get an objective score for a very subjective idea and right brain fuzzy kind of what was previously untrackable. Okay, so 2021, huge strides by implementing the things that we just talked about. Now he's looking at $2.33 million. Look at that overhead. This is gorgeous. His overhead dropped down to 53%. Okay? His production collection ratio now is 101%. We fixed the billing department. You look at the right column variance, Very, very few overages in red. He's starting to look very, very profitable here. So here is what he's looking at, 19.94% for payroll, looking better. His expenses are now in check, 33.06. He's about 3% over, but he makes up for that because his fixed expense of payroll is lower and below budget. Now he's paying his doctors more than 30%, 34.04%. That's fine, which drops the profitability. Remember, there's some fudge between doctor pay and profitability. Total overhead, 53%. His income, $269,000, which is owner income, plus $570,000, $840,000. So he's given himself a $500,000 raise in a year and a half. That's take-home income. Congratulations, Dr. R. Things are looking very, very good, simply because he focused on simple things. I say simple, but simple things like culture, basic business acumen, and leadership. 2023, things continued to get better. Look at this production, guys. $3.344 million in production. Uh-oh, what happened? His overhead looks like it went up 60%. How in the world could he have gone up in overall overhead with that much of an increase in top line revenue? Simple explanation. He added providers and he expanded his operation. Okay. Now, when you see a bump like that in overhead with an expansion, that means that those are one-time expenses. He doesn't have to worry about continuing to pay those expansion expenses month after month, year after year. And eventually that spike in overhead is eventually going to start to drop and then level out and then drop below what the baseline was before. Because now we have more capacity to see more patients, to bring more providers in. And if that machine, that marketing machine is still churning, you're going to have the ability to continue to grow. Overhead will continue to drop. Revenue will continue to increase. That expansion, budget, and one-time expenses will pay itself off tenfold. Okay, so we're looking at his income now. His total overhead was 60%. His income now is going to be flat or maybe decline a little because that overhead went up. Even though top line went up, overhead went up as well. So his income remained flat. I know it sounds really obvious, but just because your top line goes up, if your overhead goes up with it, nothing is happening as far as profitability. They're going up together. So you're not taking more money home. There's a lot more moving parts. You can go from 1 million to 2 million, but if you go from 50% overhead to 65% overhead, your paycheck is actually going to decrease because your overhead and your expenses are rising at a clip faster than the top line. Okay. So now let's look at 2024 projected. Really, really big stuff happening for him in Q1. We're going to project out over the year 2024, his overhead 46%. His practice revenue will end up at $4.128 million. His debt service will be $204,000. Here's what we're looking at by the end of 2024. His owner income is $207,000 plus $1.369 million in EBITDA. His take-home income by the end of 2024 will be $1.577 million. It's pretty impressive. So if you're comparing 2019 when he started with us, remember 2018, this practice was at $550,000. His first full year with us went from $550,000 to $1.1. Okay. 2022, $2.3 million and 53% overhead. And his personal take home was $840,000. 2023, $3.4 million, 60% overhead. His personal take home income dropped a little bit because of the increase of the one-time expenses for expansion. 2024 will be $4.1 million, 46% overhead, $1.577 million in take-home income. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's a gorgeous practice. And that's why he's the Golden Rhino Award winner of the year. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you this awesome case study. This beautiful human being, Dr. R, is Dr. Reza Madaris. Come on up, Reza.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Reza, how are you, sir?
Super stressed.
Super stressed. Okay, I want to tell you guys that Reza, when I first invited Reza to be the Golden Rhino recipient award winner several months ago, Jake and I had selected him, and he was very, very reluctant. He explained to me that he's a very modest person. He doesn't like to brag. He doesn't feel comfortable with the world seeing his numbers out in front, and he doesn't want to be pretentious and didn't want to come off like an arrogant person in any way. And I reminded him of the people that had come before him as the Golden Rhino recipients. You will never meet more humble people than Dr. Ben Kakis, Dr. Summer Casmel, Dr. Matt Slifka, and Dr. Paraj Patel, some of the nicest, most humble people in the world. And what I also reminded him is he, in fact, was one of the people that was actually inspired by the previous Golden Rhino Award winners to do some of the work that they were doing. So they actually, in showcasing their progress, inspired you, and this is what you became. So I let him know that if he could inspire one person in the room today, or one person of the 15, 20,000 people that's going to hear his case study on the podcast, then all of this would be worth it. Is it not? Okay. So congratulations, and tell us a little bit about your journey.
It's a journey still in progress. I hope that, obviously it's very uncomfortable to be in this position. But just like Mark said, I hope that if one person sees what's possible, that it's worth it. I was basically inspired by people that gone before me. And also what I love about this group is the fact that everyone is able to share their, basically there's no basically competition. Everyone shares. If I have direct messaged many people in this group about how are you doing XYZ, and I have, without any doubt, not even once I've had anyone that will basically not share. And basically being here is standing on the shoulders of giants, people that have gone this road, and what that does, in my experience, is it shortens the time span from you basically don't make the mistakes that they've made. You learn what they've done, and you go on and you go forward. So there's by no means I feel like that I'm done. I have so much more work to do. I'll be asking questions from many of you because I don't think that any one of us has figured it out. So the more you know, the more you can help each other, the better it gets, because it gets very lonely, you know. If you don't know what's possible, it could get very lonely.
Yeah. Awesome, Reza. So if you were to impart any wisdom on the people that right now feel like they're kind of in the middle of the soup and they are struggling to keep their head above water, what would be that small bit of advice? Because that's where you were when I actually met you.
Yes. So what I try to do on day-to-day basis is just a little bit better than the day before. 1 degree of improvement is my goal. And I found at times in my journey that, I couldn't breathe. I felt like, that door opens, your office door, and this patient called, or that staff member had this issue, or your hygienist didn't show up. All these problems that every single one of us have. And I had to basically say, just one problem at a time. So I try to really minimize and working on one thing at a time. And I had to constantly remind myself to be patient because it's a long journey. It's not who gets to a certain level the fastest. It's who can stay the course and go as long as possible. These things were what I thought that helped me.
One of the things that he won't say because he's very, very modest is that he truly is, and Jake is right over there. This is one of the things that we talk about as far as you go, extreme implementer, somebody that takes a tiny bit of advice and really digs in and implements very, very literally. It's like if we say do XYZ, he does XYZ, gives us a call and says, what's next? Very, very eager to get through tasks in front of him as quickly as possible. And I will say across the board, the one trait across all the Golden Rhino recipients and all the black belt coaches that you guys are going to meet tomorrow is that they know how to implement. They have that gene, that implementation gene, that they're going to bump into obstacles and setbacks just like all of us, but they figured out a way to push through that. And I have to say that I'm really just inspired by what you've been able to do in a very short period of time with us.
The way I look at it is that if you take time out of, our families, in my case, especially I drive an hour to my home, and a lot of times I'm in my office until 5, 6 o'clock, and by the time I get home, it's late. So if I'm taking time out of my family, I better make it work. I better try to at least make it worth. And if I'm spending time getting this information, how good is it if I don't use it, if I don't do it? So just simply, whatever it is, I look at my practice also as a laboratory. I test drive. Some of the things may work for one office and doesn't work for my office. So I check, and I've told my team that it's okay to make mistakes. We don't want the same mistakes. These are things that my good friend Alistair also talks about. So we made a call. We created a culture of test driving. Is it working? Is it not? We come back to it, and then we tweak it. We try it again. So we constantly changing to see what works.
Amazing, amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, one more time, let's hear it for Dr. Reza Madaris. And here, my friend, congratulations for all of your hard work. You get this Rhino trophy that we found on Amazon that has yet to have a placard on it, but congratulations for being the 2024 Golden Rhino recipient. Congratulations, my friend.
Love you, man. Thank you.